Hello, and welcome to the A.D.H.Deep-Dive, the show that's not about ADHD, but is filled with proof it exists. My name is David J. Mund. I am a very sleepy boy. I just woke up, but I realized that I didn't do a little bit of an intro for the episode you're about to listen to. So upcoming is an episode with Bethany Steinhauser. She is a freelance florist and a good friend of my good friend, Molly Teasma. Her and I had not met yet, but we've talked a little bit through social media, plenty of mutual interests there. So we decided that we would meet via a podcast episode. In this episode, we talk a little bit about our religious backgrounds. We talk about the freelance industry, the woes of millennialism, and then we get into a pretty lengthy conversation about relationships, relationship dynamics, open relationships, personal insecurities, that sort of thing. So if you have not done so yet, please be sure to, if you're listening on iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, please make sure to hit that follow button and give it 5 stars on Spotify. It really helps the old algorithm. And then, as always, we've all been on YouTube since 2006, I'm sure. So if you're watching on YouTube, give it a good thumbs up. Maybe leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about the episode. And then follow the page on Instagram or follow the podcast on Instagram. But if I haven't said it yet, I'm pretty sure that I did. This is the A.D.H.Deep-Dive, the show that's not about ADHD, but is filled with proof it exists. My name is David J. Mund, and let's get into the episode with Bethany. Because I know that it's, 12:45 here? You said it's a 3-hour difference, 9:45?
Yeah.
What is, before we get into any of the actual stuff, what is your relationship to caffeine? Do you have
my relationship to caffeine?
Yeah. Do you have one?
I do, yes. I have a strong relationship to caffeine.
Okay. Are you an all day, every day kind of drinker, or just your cup in the morning? What is your preferred caffeine source?
So it used to be, coffee all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
Start in the mornings with it. I would drink it all day at work. And then 4 or 5 years ago, I stopped drinking daily coffee and I switched over to mushroom coffee, and I drink mushroom coffee every morning now.
Was it you that was telling me about that through message or something? Somebody recently just told me a little bit about mushroom coffee. Is there any substantive difference?
It's definitely slightly, there's still some caffeine, you get a little caffeine, so it's not like you're going cold turkey.
Sure.
But I do feel a huge difference just in my daily everything. It's the one I use has 6 different kinds of mushrooms in it. And it's a little earthy at first. I feel like there's definitely more options out there now besides for this one that people might like, but I like it, and I feel like every day it just...
Are you a creamer girly?
Oat milk.
Oat milk? Just oat milk or oat milk creamer?
No, God, no. Just oat milk.
Okay.
I was never a creamer. Oh, not to sound judgy. People that put creamer in things, it's fine. They're allowed.
I have no shame in the fact.
Girly?
Oh yeah, I'm a creamer girly. Oat milk creamer though.
Oh, okay. Well, at least that's better.
Yeah.
You're not one of those people that's cream and a little bit of caffeine.
No. I feel like the 1-2 punch of coffee caffeine and dairy creamer. Not to go there, but it's just not great for the old belly.
It's not good. Dude, and people be doing that shit literally all day.
Yeah.
All day, just combining those two, and I'm like, God, that's terrible on the stomach. But I definitely have an addictive personality, so caffeine is one of those things that's if it's not coffee, then it's going to be some other form of caffeine. Sometimes I do pre-workout, because Celsius, energy drinks, I'm not a huge... I'll do some Celsius. I don't buy them, but if someone has one, I'll drink one. But
you'll do what? Like some Celsius, or it's substance?
I'll do
substances.
All of the above.
Okay.
No, I mean, I also do substances.
Yeah.
No, I usually don't do energy drinks, but if someone has them, I will do them.
Sure.
Sometimes they're just a little too much. But yeah, coffee, sometimes Adderall, sometimes pre-workout. I don't like being tired.
That's exactly it.
I don't like being tired.
I'm worried for myself at this point so I never liked the Red Bulls, never liked the Monsters, never liked any of that stuff. but I recently was turned towards Celsius, and I could be getting the numbers wrong here, but I want to say like a cup of coffee is like either 60 to 120 milligrams of caffeine. Then a shot of espresso is like 60 to 90, something like that. But then a Celsius has 200 milligrams of caffeine. And I think the daily recommended total is like 400 max. So I've found the perfect way. So I'll like have my cup of coffee in the morning.
Right.
Then around noon. Yep, that's right. Around noon, I'll have my Celsius. And then later in the day, I'll have a shot of espresso to finish out the rest of the day. But the issue is, like you said, like sometimes it's a bit much. And if it's a bit much, there's a hard crash. If it's not enough, it's because my body is getting used to the amount of caffeine that I have now. And like, I'm worried now that I've reached that like upper limit, it's like there's nowhere to go from here. Like,
dude, that's why I had to like way cut back coffee, because one, it was like eating my stomach inside out and giving me so much worse anxiety when I never realized like I already have anxiety.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, the copious amounts of coffee a day might make that worse. But then it's like, you get to a point that you're like, can I even drink more caffeine? Because I need to, but it's slippery slope, man.
Yeah.
But also like, if you're getting shit done and you got things to do, like,
right. I'm sure this will come up in greater detail later on, but for the anxiety side of things, I've recently kind of like started cutting back on the amount of weed that I smoke. It started kind of intentionally. So I've had like in the last 15 years, like 8 different times where I'm like, I'm quitting smoking weed. But every single time I do that, it's that cold turkey thing where like I come to regret it.
Hard, bro.
With anything. And I just
with
miss
anything,
it.
cold turkey's hard. Yeah.
Especially for something so social.
Yeah.
So like caffeine is one of those things that I could find myself maybe in the future cutting back on because it's something I do by myself. But the social like ritual of like, well, everybody else is smoking, I can maybe hop into that. That's been like a tough thing because like if you go to a bar or if I'm playing at a show or something, people are having drinks and they're smoking weed. But the anxiety part of it, I cut back the amount of weed that I smoke at the same time that I bumped up the amount of caffeine I intake. So initially that was like tough because my body was like recovering because let's be real, there are weed withdrawals. There are THC withdrawals, and people who have not gone off the deep end with marijuana like are not really privy to that. I at least, and maybe this is a subjective thing, but I've had THC withdrawals just because it was an all day, every day kind of thing.
Yeah.
But knowing full well that I'm prone to anxiety, having this amount of caffeine with THC in my system, I'm sort of glad that I don't smoke as much now. Yeah. My anxiety would have been through the roof.
Oof, yeah. That's like a tricky combination. Weed is so hard like that though, because it's such a different, like what you're saying, like with withdrawals and like, it's just such a different type of daily medication.
Yep.
That people assume that it's the same reaction as like if you're doing something harder, and it's like, no, it's not like that, but it is just like you just get used to that like being how you operate throughout the day. And like I enjoy things when I'm stoned. I have a lot of fun already, but I have more fun when I'm stoned. So it's like, oh, it's almost like you just miss a little bit of like extra sparkle sometimes.
Right. And if tolerance works in one well, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, you're good. Go.
If tolerance works in one direction, it also works in the other direction. Because like as you start smoking more, it gets harder and harder to be stoned. Yeah. Then once you're there at those upper limits, your body expects a certain amount of THC in your system so that when you start dropping back, even if it's all just up here, like the withdrawal is your body being like, where's this thing that we've had in our system for so long?
Right.
So,
I feel like the bodies do that with all things though, you know?
Yeah.
Anytime you give it excess anything, and then anything that's like, oh, well, it just takes time for your body to adjust regardless. Like anything that you're giving it all the time, that's what it adapts to. And then it's like, oh, we're not going to do that anymore? Like, I thought that was normal. I thought that was regular. Yeah. Good on you for that, though.
As maybe a bit of a hard pivot, because I know that we're going to get back to this whole like routine building thing. Whether it's like internal with like weed or caffeine, or like we're probably going to talk a little bit about exercise and like moving your body. But just, I think for the listeners to know, kind of our link here is I have met you pretty much only through social media. Well, not pretty much. Only exclusively through social media and messaging.
Yes.
Through Molly Tiesma, who has been on this episode a few times, or on this podcast a few times.
Beautiful angel Molly.
I know, I love her so much. I just had like an hour and a half long phone call with her last night, and like I believe she's coming back in like 2 weeks. So we're just setting up what we're gonna do when she's visiting here.
Yay! I'm glad you get to see her when she's in town.
So excited. But so for the listeners, a lot of what you're going to hear in this conversation isn't just like the social side of what a podcast would be via interview with a person. I'm learning literally everything about you from the ground up because I don't know you.
Right.
You come highly recommended, and just from the art space, seeing what you do with. Again, I only know your life via social media, but
which is very small. My social media life is very small. Social media life from me. I'm getting better at it, but it's not a full tell.
Maybe this isn't the point, but that's maybe a good thing. Like, you're allowed to keep some stuff close to the chest, and social media doesn't need all of you.
No. Definitely doesn't.
We're millennials, so we know that like social media gives you false expectations of what a person is, but not everybody needs to know more than just the cool shit that we're up to.
Exactly.
But on that note, because I don't know much about you, other than like some bits and bobs, how comfortable are you taking over like a little bit of backstory? Like,
doing a little lore into my life.
Yeah, so the origin stories. Where'd you grow up? What was family life like back then?
So let's do it. Yeah, I have. This is kind of fun because the fact that you don't know any of these things about me will probably come to a little bit of a shock.
Okay.
Because I feel like
I'm excited for that.
Well, maybe not like a shock. I just feel like oftentimes I tell people about my life and they're like, "Oh, that's how you were raised? Like, you're really normal. That's cool." You
okay.
know? So I was born on the East Coast, but we moved when I was very young to the Midwest. So I am a East Coast born, Midwest girly. I grew up in Kansas.
Okay.
And then moved to Missouri when I was like moved over to the border when I was like 19, 20 maybe.
Okay.
So between Kansas and Missouri, that's where I spent like 27-ish years of my life.
Okay. Let's even touch on that Kansas site. When did you guys move out there? Or were you saying that's where you were born?
No, I was born in Maryland.
Okay.
Both my parents, we all lived there. Oh yeah, well I guess I'll just also say I am one of 8 children.
Okay, that was going to be a follow-up question. Any siblings or anything like that?
Yes, I am one of 8 children. There's 6 girls in my family, 2 boys. I'm like,
whoa,
kind of in the middle. I have 4 older sisters and then an older brother and a younger brother and younger sister.
Maybe it's presumptive, but same parents? Everybody?
Same parents.
Woo!
Yes, my parents are actually still married. They just celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary like a month ago. Yes, full house. On top of that, I was also homeschooled. So full house
from
and spending
start to finish.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
I went to community college for my senior year of high school.
Okay.
Technically, so but yeah.
Can you say that you're a college student being homeschooled? Is that even a thing? I don't know.
I mean, it was at the time. I was very uncomfortable to be like a little 17-year-old in a community college room that was like very, very socially awkward and hanging out with people that are like way older than me. But yeah, technically, I guess I could say I was a homeschooled college student at that time.
Sure.
So grew up in Kansas, grew up spending a lot of time outside, a lot of time in the natures. I'm a big nature person from that. My mom's really into gardening, which also transferred to all of us.
Okay.
Let's see here. Yeah, homeschool all the way through. I started doing gymnastics when I was a kid.
Okay.
And then also stuck with that. Did gymnastics and dance all through high school. I taught the whole time I did that. I was like teaching classes when I was like 14.
How's the like extracurricular activities work as a homeschooled kid? Like, because it's not like part of a school unless you're.
Yeah.
How's that work?
So there's a lot of different options for that type of thing. There are like homeschool communities and different like groups that will like have their own like extracurricular activities that you do. We weren't really a part of those in Kansas much. I think when my parents lived on the East Coast, there was more of that. So then it was kind of just like whichever one you wanted to do, kind of.
Sure.
So like some of my older siblings did debate. So there was like a homeschool debate group. So like 3 of my older siblings did that. I was a very active kid and I wanted to do more sports, so we did that. And like,
so there's a different universe where you would have been a politician rather than a florist.
I mean, maybe. There definitely could be. I feel like it is funny to think about the person that I would be if I had taken debate instead of done gymnastics. That's for sure. Yeah, because my older siblings are definitely, I'm close with like, I'm on speaking terms with all of my siblings. We'll say that. And then I'm close within like certain pockets. But my 2 older siblings that I'm really close with both did debate, and they are very analytical, very smart. They read a lot. It's good. They're great conversationalists. Good people to get in with.
Okay.
But it was a different world. Honestly, it'd probably be kind of good. Maybe it'd be louder in my life if I did. But, you know, it's fine because the dance studio I went to was run by this amazing woman who was basically all about teaching children how to, like, be kind and respectful and loving. And then she also taught tumbling, is, like, what she said. Mm-hmm. And she was great. She was kind of like, basically like a grandma figure to me. And she was doing cartwheels well into her 70s. She might still be able to do a cartwheel. I'm not sure. Right. She's pretty legit. So, you know, dance was fun. I got to teach and, like, lean into leadership skills pretty young.
You say you got to teach. I assume you taught, like, much younger than, like, the little ones?
When I very first started teaching, I would teach kids that was, like, their heads are so big they couldn't even, like, reach their hands over to, like, push up in a back bend, you know? Like, it was fun. They all called me Miss Bethany, you know? Like, it was a good time.
Miss Bethany.
Yeah, Miss Bethany. But, yeah, that was a really big part of my life for a long time. Love that dance studio. I had some great connections. And got to, like, lean into things that I maybe wouldn't have otherwise.
When you get there, and this is just ignorance coming from my side about homeschooling in general, but like, what is your social life with like other kids before that? Like, where did you go to like socialize with other children besides, I mean, you have a full clan at home, so maybe.
Right. That is a very lovely way to say that. Most people growing up would just be like, do you have any friends? How do you make friends?
Right. Yeah.
So I was also raised with strong religious background. My parents
that note.
Yes, technically saved, like their second year of marriage, and then were Christian, conservative Christian. That's what I was raised with all the way. So
are they still part of the church?
Friends, kind of.
Okay.
Partially.
I don't necessarily want you to feel like you have to speak on their behalf, but I'm just wondering for
totally
context.
Fine.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you're good. They still have their beliefs for sure. I don't know that they are actively part of a church, but I know they still like have their faith and believe in the Bible and stuff. My mom and I have conversations about it pretty regularly.
Sure.
So yeah, but we have a
your
Sunday lot of history with our relationship with the church. Yes.
Oh, we're gonna get into that.
Sunday school. That's how I met most of my like friends before I was like doing gymnastics and stuff. Would be church friends. So, you know, little girlies in our little church dresses, misfits, and well, as much as you could be.
Well, you said conservative Christians. What was the denomination growing up?
We kind of bounced around a lot.
Okay.
I don't know what it would have started as directly. We went to one church for an extended period of time that was like very, very conservative. Like no women weren't allowed to wear pants. There's no women in no women in any of the leadership roles. Like all all male pastors, male choir directors. It was a little. Probably could board a little on the cultish line.
Sure.
Some of the things back then. And then we had like a big falling out with that church. And then it was like, you know, we went to a Baptist church for a while. Okay. We went to a different, and then we kind of like hopped around. And I think the one that we stayed at the longest after that was probably a Baptist church.
Yeah.
So it was a wild journey. There was a lot of churches there throughout the age of like 10 to 17, which is when I got ties with all that. So.
For personal context, and I know, I guess just again for the listener, when bringing up the idea of even doing the podcast to Bethany, it was like, what are some things that you believe you could talk about for a while ad nauseum? And religion was one of those things. And I decided not to press on that at all because I'm happy to talk about it. And I know I myself could talk about it forever, but I was like, let's leave it for the podcast to discover. I see. This is where that's coming from. Okay.
Yes. There's, it's a lot, things that it was a big part of my life for a long time. And I have a lot of opinions about it now as an adult. So it's like, I could talk about that for hours.
We'll talk about that. For your own context, I guess for my context. Wait, hold your water bottle back up. Oh, I thought we had the same water bottle. I just have stickers all over mine. They look like the same hue.
That would have been cool. I was going to say, so this is the naked one that is clean.
Oh,
My other
yes.
one is completely covered, but the other one's bigger. So
you haven't stickered it up yet.
No, I haven't decided yet.
Yeah.
Too many stickers to choose from. You have to lay it all out and plan it out.
I drop my water bottle so often that any sticker that goes on to my water bottle ends up getting dinged up and scratched up. So, I know I've already said this up front. I have not said it personally, but I know that it will be added after the fact. The A.D.H.Deep-Dive is the show that's not about ADHD, but is filled with proof it exists. So we're going to go from talking about religion and trauma and relationships and all this stuff to stickers on water bottles. And you're going to deal with it.
Yeah.
So for my own religious context, at my mom's house, I did not go to church. At my dad's house, he went to a Baptist church that he's always gone to, still goes to. And then when I took on my own semblance of religion at my mom's house, now my mom maybe believes, but I don't know that. I know that she doesn't practice. So it's not like she was like going to church with me. This was like my own decision at the time. I went to a Christian Reformed church. Okay. Which felt like they were able to just be like loose and fast with some of the biblical teachings and not have to like tie themselves down to one philosophy or another. It was just like, let's get everyone in and like they can find their own reason for being here. Whereas like Catholics have a particular way of practicing. Baptists have a particular way of practicing.
Yes.
Maybe this is a little bit forward, but if you... I assume your family went every Sunday?
Oh, yeah.
When did that stop for you?
It was every Sunday.
Oh, go ahead.
And then sometimes Sunday nights. And then sometimes every... So, like, the earlier church would be, like, Sunday morning, Sunday night sometimes. And then when we moved into, like, the Baptist church, it would be, like, Sunday school, Sunday church.
Yep.
Wednesday night church.
Wednesday night youth group.
Activities. Wednesday night youth group, man. Yep. Youth group was popping off of that pizza.
Yep, that's right. They conditioned us with dodgeball and video games. So like, here we go. Dodgeball and video games, then we do the teachings.
It's like a really cool hangout session, guys. You just come hang out. It's really cool. There'll be a brief message, some worship. It's fine.
Right.
There's some CDs you can rent over there. Like, it's cool.
Yep. Subtle indoctrination.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely was pretty, like, deep in it. Mm-hmm. Like, that was my whole high school was all of that. And then it was probably, I was going on mission trips when I was, like, 15, 16.
Same.
Playing a little keys in the little youth band.
Oh, you're musical as well.
Oh, did you know that I play? Yes, I play piano.
All right, I did not.
I won't
know
say that I play keys, but I do play piano.
All right,
I'm a musical girly. But I would say it was like, probably like 14, 15. When things were starting, I was starting to like wonder about it more so. And then 15 to 17 was like, I kind of fallen out of going more regularly. And I got
How did your parents feel about that?
I would still go.
Okay.
Just not like as much. They had also been burned a lot by the church and people at that point too. So they kind of understood.
Okay.
My whole family has had like pretty terrible treatment from religious people for pretty much my whole life. And so they were like, we'd still go, but like if I didn't want to go to youth group and stuff like that, then they wouldn't push it when I was like 16, I was old enough to like drive and kind of do my own thing. And I would say, well, no, I know for sure it was when I was like 17, the summer that I was almost about to turn 18, is I think when I like completely like denounced Christ, was completely done. Like, I'm giving up on this. Like, goodbye.
Yeah.
And I remember waking up the next day and not feeling any different and actually feeling better and being like, oh, wow, cool.
It's almost like you had been suppressed and repressing some personal feelings up until that point.
It's so weird. So weird. But yeah, I feel like 15, 16 is probably when I started kind of like backing out. But so side note, when I was 15, I started talking to this guy that was 5.5 years older than me, and we got like really serious. And when I was 17, I had like a promise ring from him and was planning on like getting married and having children. And
how very Christian of you.
Yes. So that was like what was happening at the time towards the end. And it was like all of these things kind of at once just like blew up and changed. And my mind was like, oh, okay, like maybe let's just slow down a little bit, figure out what my life actually is before I make these massive decisions. So I feel like the ending of my religious beliefs tied into like ending that relationship. And it was kind of this like big moment of like choosing my own life going on from that. 2012. That was the year.
Probably right around the same time here. Subjectively, I have this really like, I don't know if I feel guilty about this, but I do regret the way that I handled this. So my mom, like I said, believed, maybe still believes, but did not practice growing up. And when I was born, I was baptized Catholic.
Okay.
When I turned 17, or maybe it was just a little bit before turning 17, at the Christian Reformed church that I went to, I chose to get myself baptized at that church. And I think I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, but upon reflection, that felt really performative, where it was like, if I do this, I get to have a moment in front of all these people where like I'm the center of attention as a public baptism, in front of a full audience. And then probably less than 6 months after that, I stopped going. So it was like, it felt like it was all this build up to this one big moment. I had it. I'm saved. I've accepted Christ.
Right.
I have reached the mountaintop.
Right.
It's pretty boring up here.
Yeah.
And so I just stopped going. And so I do feel, like I said, I don't know that I feel guilty about it. I do regret that I handled it in that way, because it felt like there were all these pressures placed on you as a kid to be like, you know, we take this seriously. This isn't just youth group, especially now that you're getting close to graduating high school. This isn't just about you know, playing dodgeball and listening to music, and, you know, Reliant K is awesome, but that's not all it is. And so, yeah, it was like I was confirming all these suspicions of people who were like, this guy's not really taking it seriously, because I wasn't. But then when I went from being what I would consider a devout Christian, even though, let's give ourselves grace, we're still children at this point with malleable brains.
Yeah.
I went from that. There's this like dichotomy of religion where you go from being diehard Christian to agnostic in a way, then open to other religion, then fervently atheist, then just kind of open to the possibilities of the universe. When you quote unquote shed this religion, where did you go from there? Did you lean into any like particular spiritual practices, or was this like clean slate, I'm done, I am an atheist, nothing is real?
Kinda in the middle. It was definitely not like a full atheist, but it was definitely, I was like done with all organized religion. I think I didn't really fall into any other practices, I would say. I think that the hardest, like, thing to comprehend and, like, grasp was, like, for my entire life, nature had been, like, one of my truest loves, and nature is always tied to God. Always. Sure. A male God at that.
I see.
And, like... separating God from nature and like finding myself and realizing that I could still enjoy everything that I had enjoyed in my life and the beauty that it provided, I could still do all those things and not feel bad that God wasn't like tied to it. It was like a weird curve of that, of like, oh, well, can I still appreciate these things if I don't believe in the thing that made it or anything like that? And I feel like that was definitely hard. I went through a pretty, like, you know, like anybody does when they've been suppressed and had no control over their body or anything for their entire life. It was like, you know, I started hanging out with people that I worked with and going to parties and doing whatever I wanted and having fun.
You mean godless
and like,
degenerates?
You know, godless degenerates, you know, doing all the bad things, staying out late hours, nothing good happens after it's dark out. Come on. You know, surprisingly, I didn't actually start smoking weed till I was like 19 or 20 though.
Okay.
That was like one that I wasn't really like into or wasn't thinking I was ever going to do. Yeah, like I'd smoked like a few times before, but I didn't start like actively smoking my own life till I was like 19 or 20.
Sure.
But yeah, I feel like it was work. Like at that point, we'll get a little backstory of flowers. So I started working with flowers when I was in high school. I started when I was like 15. A little grocery store, floral department, you know. It was one of my first real world experiences of like.
Was this just a job you stumbled into?
Actually, no.
Okay.
Give a little tip to my mom. My mom did flowers in high school for like a couple years, and growing up, being a big family, we also knew a lot of other big families that had a ton of kids, and they all got married. So then, like when friends of the families would get married, my mom would do their flowers for like budget weddings, right? You know, like that would be like her gift to them, and then me also being where I was in the lineup, like I just helped out with a lot of that. And then I had like 2 of my sisters got married one summer and we did all the flowers and everything for that. And so that kind of what started it. And then my mom has just suggested that I go apply for the floral department. And I did. And I started doing that when I was like 15 and kind of realized I could keep doing it. And like, as long as it made me happy and paid the bills.
Was this more sales, or was this like actual, when you say going for a floral department, it's different than doing like floral designs for weddings and events and stuff, right? You're like,
yes. So this is like daily arrangements. This is like making little arrangements to put in the cooler, cleaning, you know, making stuff for people, taking care of plants. It's very like entry level of like when you walk into a grocery store and you see all of the flowers and plants, like just learning how to take care of that and like, you know, arrange and whatnot. So I did that for a couple years and like outgrew it. And then moved into an events-based shop. And so through all of, like, the growth and the, like, figuring out who I was, like, flowers were, like, the maintainer.
Okay.
Like, I always had a job in flowers, and they honestly sometimes kept me out of a lot of trouble and, like, kept me going because when everything else felt like I didn't know. It was always that. Because I really drove really drove into work. I definitely, all of us, you know, my siblings are very independent, very hard workers.
Okay.
My dad's a really hard worker, and so it's very, you know, we all got jobs young, moved out when we were 18, like, getting on with our shit. But I don't really feel... I've always gone in and out of, like, fitness and, like, checking in with my body and, like, how that combines with, like, spirituality and mental health. But I don't think I really had, like, a solidified structure. So that's probably, like, 21, maybe. When I was 21, I went into, like, a big, like, I was working a lot, and I was going to school part-time, and going to the gym, like, every day, and, like, very structured. Like, I wouldn't say it was spirituality for sure, but just kind of, like, how to get my own, like, routine, rhythm, and understanding, like, how I operate and what I need to do to, like, function successfully, I guess.
I want to pick up on that because I know, to just, again, a peek behind the curtain, one of the other things that we were talking about is, like, exercise and moving your body, and or that this is one of the things that you had put down as a bullet point of, like, things you could talk about endlessly. So to try and, like, tie some of these 3 things together, and if I may just quickly conjecture on back on the God thing, among many other things, I feel like one of the places that Christians get it wrong, or that Christians maybe focus a little too much attention on, is this Holy Trinity. That, like, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. That's where a lot of hang-ups for Christianity come from, where it's like, well, how can this guy be this thing, and this thing, and how can it all be in one physical form of some dude who came down thousands of years ago? And And that's where they lose a lot of people, is sort of the mystical lore of it all. But when we're talking about like spiritual connection to the self and to nature, like you said, that you were like trying to separate some of the physical side of nature and beauty from the spiritual side of what Christianity maybe holds that as. I did a podcast with my former youth pastor, and this is many, many years after I've left the church. And I consider him a trustworthy person who I have serious fundamental disagreements about life with, but who that I still respect. He's definitely an evangelist in that, like, he would say as much. It is his life's mission to continue to recruit people to the church or to help people know God. But one of the like kind of fundamental disagreements we had, which I would have with any Christian, is that God is a dude. And I don't mean that as like he's a man, but like that God is a person. I have this eternal struggle that I feel like I will struggle with until the end of days, that like God is more of an all-encompassing, like it's not a thing. Like it kind of feeds itself into the, like, we are all God. Yes. Everything is God. Yeah. And that tropish, like, we are the universe and consciousness experiencing itself. With nature, that's a big part of it, where it's like, if I'm sitting down in a beautiful garden with a Christian, they will say, look at all of God's wonderful creations. But for me, it's like, this is God. Like this.
Right.
So right. Where does that separation for you come a little bit? Because I know you had kind of subtly hinted, and maybe I'm focusing on the wrong thing here, but you're like, your love for nature and flowers and I guess let's just use nature as the main word here. I guess maybe touch on what you meant by you coming to love nature despite God. Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, like, I guess just like making that harsh separation, that you can still appreciate it even if you don't believe like that is what created it. But
sure.
Then coming to this point now of like, yeah, it's all one and the same. Like, I have a problem with the word God, especially the Christian God, because it's male and because it's like, so I have a hard time with that word. But I feel like it is all the same. Like, it's all energy. Yeah. Like, you can't go outside and spend a day in nature and not tell me that fucking everything is connected. And then you can look at humans and you can still see all of these patterns and all of these things that replicate in humanity just like they do in nature and everything else in the universe. That it's like, okay, you can't tell me that they're not all connected and that they're all like breathing the same life force, And
well, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, it also feels like a little like, almost like disrespectful to nature to be like, oh yeah, some dude in the sky just like whipped this up. Like, yes. No. She has been working for years and years and has like grown and evolved to this version of herself. And like, it's not just something that you can just be like, oh, like, right. That was a big realization that like believing that God just creates everything is a really simple way to believe it. Correct. And it discredits so much. And now I feel like I wonder at nature even more so, not believing in a God, because it's like even more incredible that we're all connected and that we're all tied together, and it's just like, the universal energy. Yeah. Because I just feel, it's energy. I feel like it's mostly energy is what I would call it.
Well, and sticking with this, like, we are the universe experiencing itself thing, in regards to nature, and more specifically, like meditating in nature, and this will kind of be our transition into like physical exercise and movement and everything. Yeah. That there's this, like, my personal preferred method of exercise, even though it's much more than that, is yoga, which comes with its own meditative experience. For sure. And I feel like there is this ability to tap into something beyond via meditation.
And
that.
I guess maybe I could just toss it back to you and kind of give you the floor here. Especially recently, just because I've viewed it through, again, just talking with you and through social media. But like you are a big advocate for moving the body, getting out and exercise, being in touch with the physical self as much as the emotional self. I know that you like kind of dabbled with gymnastics, but like where does the like attachment to physical exercise come from, or the discipline? Where's that come from, you think?
The discipline, I think, comes from just like needing to fucking do it. Like knowing that my mental health will be in a much better place if I commit and doing it. And that like, because I've gone through a lot of different periods where I will fall way off and not exercise. I've gone through years where I don't exercise at all, and then I get back on again, and like I'm always a better person, period, when I'm doing some form of exercise. Like, doesn't matter what you do, like just moving your body, getting your heart rate up. I feel like especially exercise in nature is like a double dose of like what you need. I feel like we're kind of just like glorified plants sometimes. Yeah. But I do think the dedication has come from just like needing to do it. Because I've gone through periods of life where like I was very rigid in how I lived, and everything had a box. Like, there was school, work, this, and most of those boxes did not overlap. And if you were in one box, you probably weren't in another box. And like to maintain that, exercise was like a really big one, because exercise gives you control back. Like, gives you control, and there's just like there's just a high that you get when you are committed to exercising and like doing whatever type is best for you. Like that runner's high that people talk about, like it's there. You just have to figure out what it is that will get you that, because that state of mental clarity and just like calm that it provides, the same as like that you get from meditation in a sense. It's just like, obviously a different way about.
I maybe have a pointed question here. I literally this morning was listening to a podcast where someone was talking about how they value exercise as a crucial point or crucial part of their being, but they hit these strides where like they finally start to see the physical gains in themselves, like and that's when they stop, because they give them they tie exercise to a superficial view of their own body. And I know personally for myself, exercise sometimes is fueled by shame. In like I was a much heavier guy. A few different times in my life I've hit that like 260 275 range, and then that's the trigger. So it's like, okay, I've gotten too heavy, I now need to exercise. Where does the motivation for you come from beyond, because it's my understanding that you've always been a smaller framed person. It's not like weight or weight gain was like the catalyst for it.
No, definitely.
Where do you think that comes from?
No, that's actually something that I try really, really hard to like not be a thing. Like when I talk about exercising, like obviously I know exercising can be used for like weight loss, and I understand that like health is everything. But I think that that's a lot of why people get into it, and I feel like that's never really a good reason to, because it's never going to last. Like only doing things for physical reasons is never going to last beyond that. But I guess for me, it's a couple reasons. Yes, I've always been like a smaller person, but also very mighty and independent. And a lot of times people see you as small and then assume that you're weak, and then will like, not let you do things, offer to do things, whatever. So there's like a part of me that I really want to be strong. Like I want to be strong. I want to be strong for my job. I want to be strong for myself. I want to prove to myself and my body like just how much I'm capable of, and like push forward for that. So I feel like it goes along with like wanting to be strong. And yeah, just wanting to like feel good. Because I think when you base it off of weight or a certain look that you're trying to achieve, which like, you know, I'll be honest, I make a lot of jokes about like, oh, I'm just trying to grow my ass so fat. I just want a big fat ass so I can sit on the patriarchy. Like, there are definitely some physical reasons that I'm like,
sure.
oh, you know, yeah, it's always in the back of my mind. But I feel like the main thing is just to like be strong and to feel good in what my body is doing. Because of gymnastics, I also have like some not great situations with like my knees, and I have like an injured ankle, and the years that I fell out of exercising were like the worst years for that. Like, I had a couple years where I was in like a lot of pain all the time, like my knees hurt every day, I didn't want to do anything, I was tired all the time. And so yeah, just like being capable, being able, and enjoying what your body's capable of during the phases that it's capable of doing them, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
so my perception of what you're saying there is that like a lot of it is, aside from like the physical strength, there's like a maintaining of a well-being rather than like trying to gain something. It's more like if you don't, you're not at base level.
Yes, definitely just like a maintaining of, making it just like the routine and maintenance so that I can continue on how I want. And I'll go through phases where it's like, you know, cool to push and like make gains and stuff. But I feel like the daily commitment of just like all the benefits that it adds are the main driving goal.
In a very subjective, maybe only Bethany could answer this question. You had posed some sort of challenge to yourself, the 30 for 30, which happy belated.
Thank
Just
you.
turned 30. We are both now in our 30s.
30s club.
How did that challenge come to be? Because I just to maybe spoil your story a little bit, I know there were a few days that you were not able to commit to that.
Yes.
When you're in those days, what is your relationship, not with the Christian sense of the word grace, but what is your relationship with like self-grace in the days that you don't exercise or you're not doing the actual gym routine? Like, are you able to forgive yourself? Is it not even about that? Or like, were you just not able to do it because you physically didn't have the time to do it?
Yeah, I feel like the few days it was more that. Like, so my goal was to move my body for like 30 before 30. Like, at first I was like, I'm just gonna go to the gym, and I was like, no, that's too strict. Like, I'm not gonna do that. I don't need to be in the gym every day. So it was definitely more like, okay, I'm gonna commit to moving my body every day for 30 days before I turn 30, which it actually came from my bestie, who also just had a birthday. We're birthday besties. Last year when she turned 30, she did 60 days of just like trying to like go whole hog as much as she could. She counted it down. I got a lot of Snapchats from her through the whole time. She was just doing like anything she could. She would do classes. She would exercise, like whatever she wanted. And yeah, it was just a really good way to kind of like get myself back on track, because also like the whole month before my birthday was like, I had months and months of like traveling and working in a lot of chaos, and then it came to like a screeching halt. And so it was like a really good time to commit myself to something. But yeah, I think I would go work out. I worked out at the gym and did my normal gym routine. I did a couple yoga classes. I did some Zumba classes again. I went hiking. I do home workouts too. Like really anything to just to do it. But the days that I don't, I've honestly gotten pretty good about not beating myself up, because, you know, like if you don't have it in you if it's circumstances outside your control, or if you're physically not feeling it, or like whatever it is, like I trust myself enough to know that like today's just not a good day. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to go back tomorrow. It doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to eat today. Like, it doesn't mean anything other than that, like, oh, I wanted to do that today and today I can't. So I feel like I've gotten a lot better. I used to have a lot of weird gym guilt, and it was all or nothing, where it was like you hit got to do this committed routine or just don't even bother going. And now it's very much like, oh, if I can go, I'll go because I pretty much always want to. And if I don't, I don't. And I usually try to do something. Like I try to stretch every day or I've, got the dog, take a walk. Like anything is better than nothing. But also, there are some days out of the month where I will literally lay on my couch and I will rot and I'll play video games and smoke weed all day. Usually it lines up with my cycle because that's another thing is like, I'm a woman and my body is different every single day of the month. And there are some days where like, I just physically can't go to the gym or I don't feel like fighting through all of what I have to do to have a good workout,
You kind of
I think about that.
You briefly mentioned that you, and I want to make sure that I'm not projecting here, because one of the things that I am finding about myself, that I have learned about myself, maybe only recently, is that a lot of my personal shortcomings are self-imposed. Like nobody's telling me I'm lazy. Nobody's telling me I'm not worth love. Nobody's telling me that I'm useless or incapable or incompetent besides me. So you said that, maybe in the past you had maybe beat yourself up a little bit about not going into the gym or not exercising. Mm-hmm. What is your relationship to negative self-talk at all? Like, does it still... I have to assume everybody struggles with it a little bit, but like, what is the evolution of your own self-talk? Like, what is it? And it doesn't necessarily need to be in relationship to exercise, but like
just in general,
the mental journey. Yeah.
The mental journey is hard. Yeah. That is, yes, negative self-talk. It's definitely evolved beyond what it used to, because it used to be, the classics of like, you're not enough, you're never going to be good enough, nothing you do matters, nobody wants to talk to you, nobody likes you, any of those things, And it's, evolved beyond that, but now it's like having a higher awareness of self can also mean that your negative self is like even harsher because you're more evolved, and so it's like cuts a little deeper now, and it'll be more of just like not such finite things, but more like negative self-talk that is like a worry for the future, I guess. Yeah. Of like, well, you feel this way today, and like you'll probably always feel that way because like this is how you felt last month too, or you didn't do that thing yet, but that's just because like you knew you weren't ever going to do that thing. So it's almost like I feel like I struggle more so with like cutting myself off before I've even started negative self-talk. Whereas it's like, girl, why would you even go there? Like, you already know that this isn't going to work out because being an anxious person, you've already thought about 20 million options into the future of how like, how this could play out. And it's actually something that I'm probably going to, definitely need to do more work with my therapist, because like, it's a hard one. And it's, I don't know about you, but like, is your self-talk so like quiet when it starts that you don't even realize it's happening? Where it'll be like a subtle little like, like, oh, whatever. Like, it's, when your brain just like says something and you don't think that it's like, you don't recognize it as a negative thought yet, but then that's where it starts. And then 5 thoughts later, it's like, oh, that was actually, I really shouldn't be telling myself this thing,
Sort of. Maybe it's a complicated answer in that the David that sits before you now, it just like most people are, is much different than the David that existed 5 years ago. But the David that existed 5 years ago, and I'm going to put this in blunt terms, definitely thought that he was going to kill himself. And so there wasn't a view of the future. There was no like perception of what the future might be. So a lot of the worry for me wasn't, or a lot of self-talk that came from me wasn't like, don't do this, it's not worth it because you're not going to be good, or that it's not worth your time. It's like, don't do this because like you're going to kill yourself soon, dude. Like, and so the David, again, that sits in front of you now is definitely more gracious to himself because he actually feels like there might be a few things worth living for. But when that self-talk comes in, it's like a subconscious reminder. It is that voice inside my head that's like, you might still do it. Like, you might, like, and I know that maybe this is, just to be clear for the listeners and for Bethany, I'm okay. Like, I'm doing okay. I'm in a very good place right now. I feel like I do have things to live for. But it would be naive and not helpful for me to not recognize that it does not take much for me to go back there. And so the negative self-talk isn't, I don't keep it away just because I want to do things. And I'm like, shut up, voice inside my head. Like, I want to do the podcast. I don't care if nobody watches or nobody finds it entertaining. Like, I want to do it. It's also like, I can't let that thing win, because if it wins, there is no David. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, maybe that's blunt and a bit aggressive to talk about.
I mean, but it's true, you know?
Yeah.
It's true.
My negative self-talk doesn't want me to not do things. It doesn't want me to be. So there's an awareness, a new awareness, that is a subconscious thought, not me. Like, I do not hate myself. Something in here does. And so there's a perpetual battle to try to win out on that thing. I don't know if that answers your question or if focuses any more towards what we were talking about. But
doesn't matter.
The negative self-talk is aggressive, but I am much more aware that it's subconscious rather than who I am. So, there's some progress.
That is progress. I mean, honestly, separating where it comes from, and like, I feel like it gives it less validity, you know?
And maybe to kind of tie it back to the religion a little bit. I also am not aware of how much trauma, because trauma is like a tricky word sometimes. Like, there is a perception of trauma that is purely physical. Like, you experienced something physical in your life, rather than what I believe my trauma to be: long-term self-doubt. Like, starting with religion saying, without God, you are nothing. Then I become a person without God, and then have to justify my absence of God by trying to convince myself that I am something without God. Like, that's trauma. Whether it's like, you know, I wasn't abused by a pastor. I wasn't like, you know, forced into confession or anything like that. It just like, it is existential trauma, not physical trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's...
Well, yeah. Because there's also, like, the difference between when people think of trauma, they think, well, like, you know, like PTSD, they think of, like a big event. And it's all based off physical or non-physical. Like, it's, like, one big thing that happened that was, like, a catalyst. And then there's, like you're saying, there's, like... Oh, I don't remember the official name for it. But it's basically, like... trauma that's just been slowly happening throughout a course of time, whereas there's not one big pinpoint thing, but there's just an accumulation of things that have happened that's like, oh yeah, like that's just as hard. Almost, I'm not gonna say it's harder, but it's hard to talk about trauma that's like that, because people are always like, oh, well, like what happened? And it's like, no, it's like, it's all these small bits, it's all these little tiny things that come together and make this overarching problem that I have to deal with in my life. It's not like one big thing. And it's hard. It's hard to like pinpoint that and understand that.
There's also, aside from the religion, there's like, I mean, I hate accepting the pity party that is being a struggling millennial, but
real.
It's so real. And we happen to live in very difficult times that have pretty much, not for all of us, but have sort of ruined our chances at having the quote-unquote normal life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Getting married, having kids, owning a home, having a steady job, retiring. You know, like, for many of us, that's just not a possibility. But it was still taught, and we saw and see people older than us even though we are adults and we are responsible for our own actions, we see people just a generation in front of us that did accomplish the typical things you're supposed to do. So there's this perception that we're supposed to be this, or we're supposed to have this by this time. And now we're 30 and like, I still have a roommate. I'm still working multiple jobs. Like,
I don't have health insurance.
I don't have a health insurance.
You
oh
know,
my
like,
God.
Literally just so many things that it's like, oh yeah, like.
And that piles on. Like, you
It does.
believe, and again, maybe this is subjective and I don't necessarily want to project, but like, I am not the things I'm supposed to be, so I carry guilt because of that. So rather than fixing those things, which are maybe still important, like I still want to like get to a point where I have a home and like a steady career and like self-sustainable reliability or reliable self-sustainability.
There you go.
I also want to like find ways to forgive myself for not being that, not having those things. Yeah. And I think that's a bigger part of trauma, is like just forgiving myself.
Just being gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
Through that process. Yeah, because it's really hard when, like you said, you've been told that you're supposed to be all of these things your whole life. Maybe not specifically, but like ultimately by a certain time, like these are things that you should have or be in your life. And when you live in a world now that does not really support any of those, it can be really scary and really hard to like figure out what that means for your life and still be able to find joy in your life, even if it's not the life that you thought you were supposed to have. Because I feel like I'm really working on like seeing that as an opportunity instead of like feeling bad about it, you know?
Right.
Like seeing it as an opportunity to be like, oh yeah, like you get to live the life that you want and do whatever you want, because the norms aren't the norm anymore and the standards that were are not. And you don't have to get married and have babies and support your family. You know, like you can if you want to, but you don't have to do that. And yeah, just being, it really just comes down to being like gentle with yourself all the time, every day, and realizing that like, this is your first time on earth. This is you trying to like process whatever fucked up things have happened or not happened in your life. And like, it's a lot. Having a conscience is a lot. Having like being a human on this planet can be a lot sometimes, but I think.
And I didn't ask for that.
I didn't ask to be born. But yeah, I took a. Well, I'm not gonna say I took like a whole class, but I did like a meditation workshop with my sister. She lives in another state. Her therapist is in another state, but she had like a video one she was doing. So we signed up for it together and we both kind of did. It's a different form of meditation. It's open eye meditation, where you just sit with your eyes open for like 20 minutes.
Oof.
And
it's already sounding very difficult for me.
Okay, so I still have really high hopes I'm going to get back on this.
Okay.
But the practice is literally you just sitting there, and then anytime you like get a thought that comes in, you just like think the words thinking, or even say it, just thinking. And you label everything under this category of just like thinking. Which is really hard to do. Sitting with your eyes open and trying to meditate is really hard. But I noticed as we did these classes that like her underlining that everything is always to just like be gentle with yourself and be kind with yourself, and like don't get upset that you can't meditate, but just be like, oh, like, it's okay. Like, it's okay. It's okay that I'm feeling this way. It's okay that I'm having these thoughts, but don't, like, set on it, you know? Just let it pass. Just let it pass. And, like, I feel like being gentle with yourself is something that not very many people talk about. Like, you don't hear the word gentle used very often in regards to how you treat yourself, I feel like. And it's really stuck with me to just, like, remember that, like, oh yeah, like, it's okay. Even if you're feeling all of the things in the world, like, it's okay that you're feeling it and you get to be in this moment and just, like, just have some grace for yourself.
There's also a part of, like, an internal acknowledgement of negative self-talk that, like, once the thought comes across, it's like, there's this perception that I'm not supposed to have these thoughts. I'm not supposed to think this thing. But, like,
you can't do that.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Acknowledging the
think.
thought. Right. Acknowledging the thought is the only thing. Like, maybe this is a shitty analogy that I'll botch halfway through it, but if someone is robbing you at gunpoint, you don't go, that person's not there, this isn't real. No, you have to acknowledge the threat in order to deal with it.
Yeah.
And
that's true, though.
Our own brains are the person with the gun. We have to acknowledge what we're doing to ourselves so that we can do something about it, rather than feeling bad that someone is robbing us with a gun.
Yes.
Acknowledge the thought, handle it, move on to the next threat. Forgive yourself if you get nicked by a bullet.
Right. Yeah, which is way easier said than done, but
sure.
It is true. I think it really starts with just awareness of yourself and being able to sort those thoughts out, especially because when you're in those really, really shitty moments, I don't know about you, but all the things that I ever learned on how to control my emotions and regulate myself go out the window when I'm having a moment of not being regulated. It'll literally be 3 days after and I'll be like, oh yeah, I know a technique that I could have done in that moment, but it's really hard. And so I feel the more you can be aware of the micro thoughts, the easier it will be when the big ones come. But yeah, just be gentle to yourself. Just be kind. We're all okay,
Okay, so to maybe put, again, I know we just acknowledged this off camera, but there's this pressure to be a good host of a podcast that is also inherently intended to just, I don't have the microphone in my hand, that is intended to be conversational. I might take this opportunity to put some of the responsibility in your hands again.
Okay.
Of the list of things that we were talking about, of the list of things that you mentioned that you could talk about, one of the bullet points was sex and relationships. We don't necessarily need to be super, super pointed in any particular direction. But when you list that as a possible bullet point for things to talk about, just in general, why do you feel or what in particular is a reason that you feel you could talk about that for a long time?
Just because it's I find it fascinating. I find humans to be fascinating, human nature, interactions. I find the human body, sex, all of the things involved in that I have just always been really interested in and very unguarded to talk about with people. If someone wants to get into the nitty-gritties of any of those, I'm always here for it.
I think
I feel it really comes down from just my natural fascination with human psychology and why we do the things we do and how things affect this and that, and also the fact that we are very animalistic creatures, and I think a lot of people forget that, and I think that that's something that's really sad, that a lot of people have just speaking of sex specifically, that people have kind of just don't make a priority in their life, don't make pleasure a priority in their life, and I find that fascinating. Tell me, let's get into it. How do we, I don't know. Yeah.
This is also two people talking about sex and relationships who were told at a young age that both of those are utilities, not experiences. That sex is between one man, one woman to make babies.
That's right. You make babies.
That's pretty much it.
And that's it. That's what it's for. Yes, I do think that is a big part of why it's so fascinating to me, is because it was such a shut down thing for so long, and so many questions that I wasn't allowed to ask or talk about, and now it's oh yeah, I want to know these things. I want to hear about different experiences. Because growing up with any form of, well, not any form, but most forms of religion, it does just become, it's very, very procedural. And you all have a role that you fit into, and if you don't fit into that role, then sorry, I don't know what to tell you. That's all that you accepted. And so I feel breaking out of that, now it's well, I've always been really open-minded. Even when I was a believer, I was very open-minded then, and that has just moved into who I am now as I believe that we are put on this planet to live and enjoy and experience life. And sex and relationships is a really big part of that.
Sure. Do you think and maybe this is a really forward question, and kind of in the way that we were talking about it being a utility. Because let's maybe separate the two, sex and relationships, a little bit.
Yes, for sure.
Of course, they will both tie into each other. But one, in the traditional sense, do you see yourself as someone who wants to have children?
No.
Okay.
Yes, no. Nope. I will say this. I maybe one day in the future, if I feel like I need to do anything on those sorts, I thought about fostering or adopting. But that's very, very far in the future, and anything beyond that, absolutely not. No desire to have my own kids, no desire to reproduce.
And again, in the very forward way of asking, do you see yourself as someone who wants to be married, or in the traditional sense, like is marriage the same thing for you as eternal commitment? Like, is marriage like a too structured of a thing?
Yeah, I'm not super for marriage. Maybe one day. My partner and I have been together for 7 years this fall.
Okay.
And I just don't really see any need for it right now. Like, later on the road for like medical reasons and things like that. Like, I understand the world that we live in. But for me personally, I don't need it. I don't see a reason for it. I think it can also complicate a lot of things and change relationships. And like, for me personally, no, it's not really a thing. Every now and then I'll think about it and be like, oh, that'd be cute. But,
there's
with what I do for a living, it's kind of hard to like, not every now and then. But for me personally, I just don't think it's like necessary for the life I live.
There's a fine line I have to walk in this podcast when I talk about marriage and relationships, because I believe that I carry a lot of relationship trauma. And while it is my story to tell, like my own life is my story to tell, it also involves inherently talking about other people who have not given me the green light to talk about their role in my trauma. So I try not to, while I certainly have like really harsh feelings towards people that have hurt me or manipulated me, I'm no saint, so I know I played a role in these breakups or these separations or whatever. But also, like, in the same journey of self-forgiveness and self-love, I also have to find a way to forgive others for doing these things to me or manipulating me or hurting me in that way. But on that note, I have not only been married and divorced, but I have been engaged and cheated on. And in between those two, so basically just, again, for the listener and even for you, and maybe even for me, so I know where we're headed, I kind of want to talk a little bit about, just even if it's just conceptually, the concept of open relationships. Okay, sort of something that like can only be talked about in a conjecturing way, because it's definitely subjective. It is not a universal truth that they work or that they are for everyone. Relationship dynamics are subjective, and if you feel like one particular way of being in a relationship does or does not work for you, that does not invalidate how I feel about it, how you feel about it. But my own personal experience with open relationships, initially extremely enticing, because even on like even on the most superficial way of looking at it, an open relationship is or can be where two people find comfort and solace and love with each other, but do not limit themselves to just the love that can be received or given by or to one person. Now, that can mean many things. It can mean that you're in a relationship filled with love and care and trust, and you're also receiving that love and validation from other people. It can be purely sex. It can be Like the intimacy you receive from multiple people in an open relationship is not defined by one particular type of open relationship. Open relationships have their own subcategories of types of openness. Now, my own subjective experience of an open relationship is in between this divorce and engagement that ended in being cheated on. I was in a relationship with someone who was secretly telling my friends that we were in an open relationship and that I was okay with it, but I did not like to know who. This is not true. A, we weren't in an open relationship, at least to me. I had never agreed to this open relationship. And B, if I was in an open relationship, I probably would want to know who. But I found out when we were like drunk at a party and they came up to me, and it was actually someone I would consider a friend of mine, was like, hey man, like I just want you to know, like, it's so cool what you and this person have. Like I'm very envious of that, like, type of openness. Like it really says something about you and this person that you can trust each other in that way. I was like, wait, what do you mean? And they're like, well, just I know that I'm kind of breaking the rules. She told me that you don't like to know who, but like I am one of those people. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, well, yeah, we've been like hooking up, and I assume that you know because we see each other all the time. And that's how I found out that she was telling me, or that she was telling people we were in an open relationship. Now, for clarity's sake, this was not the only person, but this was one of the people that I had found out about. And so that put a pretty sour taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
For someone who could have been open to the idea of being in an open relationship. Now, this was just my first experience with like that even as a possibility. It was like, I had never really thought of myself as a non-monogamous person up until I was forced to be one. You know what I mean? How do I transition into... So as a person who I am open to love in all forms. What that looks like, I don't know. But openness scares me because of, again, let's use that trauma word, not because the concept is not enticing to me. Like, I am not against open relationships in principle, and I'm not against them in my own subjective life, my own personal life. But I guess, again, to toss it back to you, what is your relationship to jealousy in relationships aside from non-monogamy? Like, is that too blunt of just a one-line question? Should I be more specific? Like,
no, I don't think so. I wouldn't. Never really classify myself as a jealous person. Maybe a little bit in some areas, but never with like partners.
Okay.
You know, like, I feel like sometimes I could get jealous of like other people's lives, or I grew up kind of poor, so like that's a thing that, you know,
wanting something that someone else has.
Yeah. But never with my partners. I'd never really experienced jealousy of somebody else, or like worried, because the way that I feel like most people talk about open relationships, where like they say it's not like for everybody and it's not going to fit this and this and that. It's like I have felt very often about monogamous relationships, to whereas I just like, it could also be because I was with a lot of heterosexual conservative men that like have so much learning to do, that it was like, you know, those types of relationships, which is very very restricting. And I could tell that there was just like versions of myself that were never going to be allowed to come out within those relationships. But yeah, it just never really felt like natural. And so like, I never really felt jealous because I guess I just kind of felt like we were all allowed to like have that, and that just because you have this thing with this other person doesn't necessarily mean that what you have with me is less. Just because you also have this doesn't mean that like what we share is less, you know, in any capacity. So jealousy was never really like a thing with people, because I always felt like we're allowed to love who we love. We're allowed to be attracted to other people. Because I think a lot of those lines of thinking stem from like society.
Yeah.
And when you really break down to like human nature, like what you want as a person outside of all those things, like what do you want? Like, are you attracted to other people? Yes. Like, does that mean that you're less attracted to the person you're with? Like, probably not. Like, things that we just are, but society has been telling you like, oh no, you're not allowed to be that, you're not allowed to be this. I started to deconstruct a lot of that and realize that like, well, that's not inherently who we are as people. Like, that's just what we've been told.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, yeah, breaking those things away, you just kind of realize that like we're all allowed to have a lot of what we want. There's more. There's capacity for more.
There's this point. I think I just wrote it down as a bullet, so maybe I'm figuring out what this means in real time. But I just wrote down like toxic attraction. So like, even aside from openness, physical openness in relationships, there is what I would maybe assume is a dominant view in society, where like, if I'm with my partner walking around through the grocery store and I see a person I find physically attractive, mm-hmm. I'm not even supposed to look at them, let alone acknowledge that they are a physically attractive person,
right.
Because of the fear of sparking jealousy or insecurity in my partner. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so in that particular relationship, the idea of even bringing up the possibility of being physical with another person mm-hmm. is like 100 steps removed from where you're at, because you're not even supposed to acknowledge that you can be attracted to other people. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's all I have to say about it. I don't know. I just, it's something that is becoming more quote unquote popular, mm-hmm. Or more universally accepted, but we've got a long way to go in society mm-hmm. towards that being the norm.
Yes.
So personally, what do you feel like, and if you may speak on behalf of society in its entirety, just because you brought up sex and relationships in general, what are some things that, knowing full well that you are not a sex counselor or a relationship therapist, you're just a person talking on your own subjective experience, what are some things that we as society could do to start breaking down some of those insecurities or jealousies, or like what's a good start, or how have you been able to get there in your own experience?
I think it really just starts with like a dismantling of the like standard for relationships in general. Mm-hmm. What it means to be monogamous, like especially in a heterosexual relationship. That's where I feel like I've had to have the most conversations with people that are like very traditional. So I feel like you need to just start breaking down like what even your relationship is and where all that stems from. You know, maybe do some research on like where those beliefs became instilled, when it started, you know, because I don't think that a lot of people are even willing to have that conversation. I think it just starts with having a conversation about if your relationship is the type of relationship that you even want, or if it's just what you think you're only allowed to have. And if it's only what you think you're allowed to have, then like, what do you want? And start asking yourself those hard questions and what that means. And I also think that like just talking about it.
Yeah.
Just talking about it in general, making it more of a common thing and not making it so awkward or weird or making it seem like a taboo subject. Like taking away the little black box that you put over it of like, oh no, we don't talk about that. Because I think that's where a lot of like situations with cheating and stuff would be way easier, is if people just started having conversations about the realness of like, we are attracted to other people. You are allowed to comment on it without it causing this whole big thing, and like getting down to like the simple things. Because you're right, like starting with that and then going, the thought of like being physical with another person that's not your partner is like worlds apart, and it should be, because it is a lot. And I feel like you have to take responsibility for yourself in this situation and realize that there is more work that you're going to need to do on yourself than you ever imagined. Because I think so many people look at like being in an open relationship as this like, oh, you know, it's sexy and it's hot and like you're going out and fucking other people every weekend. And it's like, that is not the reality of what it means. And there's so much more that comes along with it. Like, that's the fun stuff. But before that happens, or in order to successfully have that happen, you need to be asking yourself really uncomfortable questions and getting comfortable with your own sexuality, your attachment method, like getting to know yourself better so that when you're in those situations, you know how to handle yourself, and you can, because there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable things that are going to come up. So I feel like, you know, having conversations about hard subjects, getting more comfortable with yourself and actually figuring out what the fuck it is that you want is a really good place to start. And realize too that like there's no right or wrongs when you're having conversations about these things. I mean, there are obviously, but like when you're just talking about it, like getting comfortable with it, like there's no judgment here. Like we're all just trying to figure out what it is that we want and who we are, and like how that involves another person and works. So I feel like, again, being gentle with yourself and being gentle with other people, not judging their experiences, you know?
In the same way that I had mentioned that like when talking about my divorce or talking about my relationships with other people, that like I'm trying to just talk on my own personal experience, but it of course involves other people.
Right.
And not trying to out them or accuse them or paint them in a particular light. Right. Let me first address, we can cut this part if we decide this is not working. But you recently have talked to me about opening up your own relationship. Mm-hmm. What has that been like for you? And what is, maybe that just transparently, what has that been like for you?
It's been really hard, actually. Very surprisingly hard. Because I have always been the one in the relationship that was like, let's talk about it. Let's do it. Like, it's always, honestly, before my partner and I even got together, it was like a conversation that I had with him of like, hey, like, we can get together and this, but like, this is where I stand on these things. And if that's going to be a problem for you, then like, we need to talk about it now, because like, I'm not going to get in a relationship where you expect us to be the only person we're with for forever. Like, that's not realistic. So from the get-go, that was the conversation. And throughout our relationship, it's been like a thing that we have, we start like, we're very trusting with each other. So like, we've had a rule for a long time that like, you're allowed to make out with whoever you want. It's fine. You want to make out with a stranger at a bar, you want to make out with your friends. Like, I'm a very physical touch person. I've made out with all my friends. Like, it's just who I am. So like, small steps like that, where realizing that like, being physical with people doesn't have to mean that it's anything else, and that you can be in love with your friends and physical with your friends, and it doesn't have to mean that you're going to fall in love with them, be in a relationship, and like, doing those sorts of things. So I have always been very open.
Okay, you saw me about to interrupt you.
You good?
But also there are some forms of open relationships and non-monogamy where that is the case, where you have not just multiple physical partners, but like there is an emotional intimacy.
Yes.
So that can be what a certain open relationship is.
Yes, that's true. It definitely can. Obviously, there's many levels. I guess for me personally, starting off with like small stuff like that wasn't a worry. Sure. Because it always I always knew that it wasn't beyond that, you know. We also hadn't had any of the conversations about like how it would look if we did start doing that. But then, yeah, some things have shifted over this last year and a half-ish or so, and it has been harder than I expected, not in the ways of like, I'm trying to think of like the right way to say this.
Sure, it's tough. Welcome to podcasting about your personal life every week.
Yeah, right? Hello. Like, not in the ways that I think most people would expect it to be. It was more of like feeling left out or dealing with like feelings of like uncertainty, you know, because we had never, like, it was just a lot at once, I guess I would say. But it's also coincided with the year that I have started going to therapy more regularly and really tearing into some real deep trauma in therapy. So like these things just happen to go hand in hand this year, and it's been an overlapping of that. But I would say that like overall, it's been really, really good for me and for my partner and our relationship. But it has been really hard because like the amount of communication that you need to have with your partner, it's that and like tenfold. Yep. Like I am a person that already struggles with communication. And it is, you have to communicate, over-communicate everything. Sure. You have to reiterate and communicate again, and then maybe even the third time communicate. You know, like it is so much communication, and it's definitely something that's like really good but uncomfortable. Like prepare for uncomfortable moments and having to sit in uncomfortability and communicate your uncomfortability. But if you can do that, and if you can remember that like the main goal is like each other, and it's not a thing that you're doing to like hurt one another or break your relationship apart, and it's really just like to expand who you are as a person within your relationship. Like just remember what the driving goal is, I guess I would say. But it's been a very emotional time. But overall, like I say, I feel like it's been really good for me. Just to like get better with communicating, honestly, and like communicate things that I never had to communicate, and communicating them multiple times has been really good. Like it's definitely been a period of growth for me in that.
Can I go ahead, sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Can I maybe have you talk less to David here and maybe to more someone who is, whether it's a listener or just someone in general? Because I have particular feelings about this thing I'm going to ask you. But someone comes up to you and says, me and my partner are not doing well. And so we've talked about what it would be like to open our relationship. Okay, I saw you slightly shake your head. That's exactly what I'm looking for. What would you say to someone who's trying to open up their relationship to save it?
I would say that is not what I would recommend.
Okay.
I don't think that, because if you're already in a place that your relationship is not doing well, then adding in something that is going to open up so many doors and reveal a lot of trauma probably that you didn't know you had, it's only going to just like add fuel to the fire. That's my personal opinion, because I think that you can only successfully have an open relationship if you and your core partner are like solid as a fucking rock. Because you have to have that foundation, you have to have that stability with that person to know that no matter what's going to happen, that you're still going to like have each other. And if you're already questioning that at the core, then like no amount of adventuring or fun things that you think being in an open relationship is going to like fix that, I think. I feel like you need to do the work to make sure that your relationship is really, really strong, because it's really hard. It's not easy.
And in the same way, knowing full well this is just your subjective experience, your personal opinion, what would you say to someone who is starting a relationship with openness? Would it be kind of the same hesitation? Like, would you always recommend that there is a strong, healthy, strengthened relationship from the start? Or I guess, what are your opinions?
I think,
without knowing that knowing full well you're not judging these people, but like, who would start a relationship with openness? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's different, actually.
Okay.
I haven't been through both, so I can't really say personally, or like, it's based off people, like relationships I've been privy to. But I do feel like it's different when that is what you start with. And also it depends on if you're with somebody that already has a partner, or if you're both, like, I think there's always going to be that like beginning phase of wanting to just like bond with the person that you're like interested in. And so like you'll naturally have like a closeness. But I do think it's a different set of rules if you're starting that way, but you still need just as much communication, and you need to be talking about, all the things. Honestly, like, I feel what has been so helpful to me in my growth with relationships is seeing how, because I identify as queer, I'm a bisexual woman, is seeing how different the queer culture approaches relationships to the heterosexual culture. And like, truly learning from some really amazing people around me of just like how to like actually get what you want with your relationship and your life, and realize that like no relationship fits in this perfect little box, and you're allowed to structure it and reconfigure it how it works for you. So if you already know that like you don't want to be in a monogamous relationship, and you're going to start off with someone like open from the get-go, then like that's your prerogative. Just make sure that you've done the work on yourself and like communicate enough. I really think it comes down to communication in all forms, like, because nobody knows what you're thinking and nobody knows how you're feeling, and especially when you're going to be playing with that many different energies and like, like there's a lot involved. Just clear communication as much as you possibly can, to all parties involved. But yeah, I think if I like thinking about where I'm at now, if I were single and were like going to be getting into a relationship, that probably would be like more of an option. Mostly just because I feel like relationships in general, I've learned a lot over the last few years. Molly has been a really big part of this, of that all forms of relation. Oh God, I love her so much. We love you, Molly. If you're watching, we love you. We miss you always.
She better be. Molly, if you're not watching, you're not seeing this, but you better be listening.
That like, though romantic relationships are very powerful, and like I am madly in love with my partner, he's probably the love of my life, like, that is not the pinnacle of this existence, and that is also not like the only relationship that can fulfill you. And letting go of the expectation that romantic love fulfills all of these things, and recognizing that different people can come in different ways, is really like been so good for me and such an eye-opener. So I feel like with open relationships, especially, just recognizing that like everybody fits in a different place. And maybe if you're in an open relationship, you have one person that's like your emotional partner and one person that's your physical partner. Or maybe one of those partners, it's not, it's just hang out. Like, it's whatever you want it to be, I guess.
Right.
And breaking down those norms of what is a standard relationship. And like, being open to all of it,
If I may, try to find some way to tie everything we've talked about today together, and of course do the more difficult part of, let me tell you, the hardest part of podcasting is ending the podcast. The like vulnerability comes with just time. Like, you learn to just kind of free flow and talk. Maybe that's a big part of ADHD, is just allowing the words to stumble out of your mouth and not judge yourself for it. But yeah, finding some way to wrap things up has proved to be the most difficult. So
makes sense.
I'm going to do the thing that I've done often throughout this podcast and make that your responsibility in a particular way. But I'll set you up. Through while also giving me the grace to try to figure out what I'm trying to say here.
Right.
Through your separation from religion and the spiritual journey that followed it, as well as being a freelance florist who considers themselves a nature fanatic, and a person who values and believes that they need to continue their exercise and physical movement, leading up to your 30 for 30 or 30 to 30, and your experience with open relationships and self-love and external love. What's something that you've learned about yourself in this phase of your life that you could have only experienced by making it through your 20s? Maybe in a pointed way, what is something that a 30-year-old Bethany would tell a 20-year-old Bethany about what she believes now versus what she believed then? And what is something... Well, let's start there. What would you say? What would 30-year-old Bethany say to 20-year-old Bethany? If you just had one thing that you could say that 20-year-old you could not respond to.
20-year-old me couldn't respond to. I'd probably just tell her to love herself more and trust in that. And be fucking loud.
Yeah?
Yeah. Because just to it's funny going through your 20s, or just going through life in general, and experiencing things and thinking that that's who you are, and then you wipe that from your personality, and you're like, no, it's not me anymore, and then, oh, what do you know? You circle back, and you're like, oh, that wasn't a phase, that really was who I am as a person.
Yeah.
And those are, the core of who I am. And that is what I feel like your 20s is, this constant, fight with that. And then you get farther enough past it, or you do enough growing, and you realize that, oh yeah, all those things that you maybe were trying not to be, those are the things that you should try to be more, because it's actually who you are.
Sure.
And, yeah, to just, look within more, I guess. Yeah.
All right. Well, if there's one way to give a last maybe 5 minutes of this podcast, and maybe this is just to end it in kind of a silly, dumb, funny way.
Yeah.
One of the final things that you put on your list of things you could talk about endlessly was potatoes. Well,
yeah.
why is that?
Because I love potatoes, man.
Okay.
I don't know. Potatoes are a one true gift where there literally doesn't matter how you prepare them. You're never not happy to see potatoes on your plate, right?
Sure.
No?
Whether it's baked or French fries or...
What's your favorite form of
mashed potatoes? Oh, gosh. All right. Oh, God.
See?
Tied are... I know, you're right. You're so right.
You're thinking about this.
Potatoes. I would say either a baked potato with sour cream and chives.
Classic.
Or, and this is maybe a controversial take, Burger King French fries. Those are my favorite ways to enjoy potatoes.
All right, Burger King French. That's very specific. That's a very specific fry reference there. Okay, I'm gonna have to try the Burger King one sometimes.
What about you? What's your favorite way to experience a potato?
Mashed potatoes.
Ooh,
all the
good.
way.
Mashed with skin chunks still?
Sometimes, yeah. I make them with the skin chunks still in there. Every now and then I'll get one of my family members makes the best mashed potatoes I've ever had, and it's creamy and delicious, and literally there's no bad day that I could have that you could set a bowl of mashed potatoes in front of me and I wouldn't be like, thanks, it's
I feel like
there's
there's a responsibility as a show host, even though I believe in my audience's ability to think for themselves. Don't eat raw potatoes. Okay? That's the only way we do not recommend you enjoying potatoes.
That's true. That is one way if they're prepared, you should not. Don't get in. Don't get in on that.
Hey.
But yeah.
Tell people where they can find you, where they can keep. Well, first of all, do you have anything? Let's go with if you had to give it 30 seconds, what's a recommendation you'd give? Whether that's like your favorite artist right now, or a movie that you'd love, or a book that helped Bethany become Bethany. Like, what's just a quick recommendation you'd give to someone to check out?
Quick recommendation of a book, I would say You Are a Badass. Great book. I read it every so often. It's just a really good little pick-me-up, you know? Like, you don't have to sit down and read it every day, but anytime you sit down and read it, like, you'll feel better about yourself afterwards. So that is I would recommend that book. Okay. If you are... spooky movies? We didn't talk about spooky things.
We didn't. That's for the next episode.
That's the next one. Highly recommend the Pearl Maxine series of films.
Oh, right. I heard about that's
very good.
That was either, am I correct that that's like being remade? Is that what's happened? Or like
no.
You see Maxine.
So Maxine is in theaters now. It is a prequel. Sequel.
Okay, so it is related.
It's a sequel. Yes, it's related to the first two. The first two were filmed during COVID. And like back to back they were filmed, and then this is related to that. But the whole series is very good. I've just watched it a few times recently, and it's been a big topic of conversation. So highly recommend if you haven't seen them. Personally, I'm a big fan of Pearl. The middle film's my favorite.
Okay.
But yeah.
And then I know we didn't talk about your relationship with the floral industry a lot. Again, I'm totally here to have another episode about this. But where can people find your work or your art, or what would you recommend, or where would you send people who want to see what it is you do?
I would say go to Instagram. I have a few different accounts as far as work goes. Spunky Renunk is my freelance handle for all of my freelance work that I do. Ranunculus is my favorite flower. Just if anyone that doesn't know what Renunk means, it's Ranunculus is a flower.
Okay.
And then if you want to see my art projects of sorts that happen every once a year, 6 months, whatever, you can go to Bee's House.
This is where I recommend people check you out.
Yes, that's my art account where I do my floral wearables and any photo shoots I've been doing, that type of thing.
If you want to see Bethany, to maybe, if I may objectify you a bit, if you want to see Bethany's booty surrounded by flowers, that is the place to be, ladies and gentlemen.
If that's what you're looking for, why wouldn't it be? Definitely. That is a growing account. It's whenever I feel. I post when I feel on that account, but I am hopefully going to be doing more collaborative art projects coming up with people that you'll be able to see. So that's just a little taste. But yeah.
So that's Bees at BEES
underscore
HAUSE.
Yes, it's a little play on my last name.
Oh, how did I not even put that together?
Because my last name is Steinhauser, so Bee's House.
Bee's House.
Bee's House.
Okay.
Bee's House. So that's where you find me. Thank you.
We've got the recommendations. You Are a Badass, at Bee's House, at what was the Ranunculus one?
Spunky _ Renunk.
Spunky _ Renunk. And we must double down. Check out potatoes in all their forms.
If you haven't already, check them out. Really good.
All right, Bethany, you go ahead and stay on the line for just a minute. For the listeners watching at home, I've said this at the front. Please hit follow on Spotify. That helps the numbers a lot. Even if you don't check out every single episode, so be it. That's fine. You are forgiven. Just push that follow button. And if you would, maybe even give it a nice little 5-star rating. That would be cool. Okay. All right. Bethany, hang on the line. Thank you so much. And to the listeners, I'll see you next time.